All right, welcome. Wow, this is exciting. Welcome to Create a Web API with ASP.NET Core. Welcome, Shane. How you doing?
Good, John. I know it's a little early for you on the West Coast there, but I'm really looking forward to what we're going to walk through with these API development.
Yeah, API development is so important. It's something that we kind of don't think about, but it powers so much around us. So obviously the web, but also mobile apps, interaction between different computers and services. There's so much like going on, so much chatting between different computers and services and things using APIs. So it's really kind of fundamental to how the web and the internet and all the science stuff around us works. So
Yeah, it's
cool.
very it's the core of even microservices. Like a ton of microservices is all APIs.
Hmm.
So yeah, this is kind of like the first step into that world, right?
Yep. Yep. Big fundamental thing. So hi, if you don't know me, my name is John Galloway. I'm a community PM on the .NET team. And Shane,
Yeah, Shane Boyer. I'm a principal advocate on the developer relations team, and yeah, just happy to be here and get started on this.
awesome. Yep. And we've got people joining from all around the world, which is exciting. So we'll be digging into that and saying hi to you in a second. This is the content we're going through. What's cool about this is a learn module. So this is available for you to walk through. What we kind of recommend is that you just kind of follow along and watch us as we go through this. And then afterwards, go through and do these steps. And you can type the exact code that we typed, gives you all the information to do exactly what we did. So there's the AKAMS link for that. You can go through and follow along. Tons of other great stuff. We're putting a lot of time into building these really quality learn modules lately. So, we hope you learn from them and give us feedback on things you'd like to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to create a web API project with ASP.NET Core. And then for this one, we really want to focus on just the API part. So we're using just an in-memory database for this. And then we're going to be showing these CRUD operations. So what is the elevator pitch? What is CRUD operations? What does that mean for you?
Yeah, so that's it's an acronym, and basically it's create, read, update, and delete, and it's really the essentials of what you need for interacting with data when it comes to an application or API. And the other thing too, John, that we're going to talk through is that last bullet point about testing the API action from a command line tool that we've put together for this as well.
Yeah, and I think this is really kind of one of the hidden gems. Even if you've been creating APIs for a while with ASP.NET Core, a lot of people don't know about using the HTTP REPL for testing APIs. And it's really, I'll be honest, as I prepared for this, like I helped write this course and I prepared for this presentation, I learned some tips and tricks in there that I wasn't aware of. It's a really powerful tool. So pay
Yeah,
attention for that part. Yeah.
sure.
Cool. This is live and interactive. We have an amazing team of moderators, which is really cool. They said, "Hey, you need to get some moderators." I asked kind of a dream team list of people, and they all said they were available, and so that's great. And we do have people joining from around the world. We've got Venezuela, we've got Victor in Utah, Jason in Singapore. It's just really cool to see all our friends all around the world, saying hi. So that's really neat. So yeah, please do ask questions in the chat. This is your time to, make sure you understand this. If something comes to you and you're not sure about it, there's probably somebody else that has the same question.
Yep. And we've got a great set of moderators, like John said. It will be helpful and get those answers to you as soon as we can.
Cool. All right. So we'll start with just kind of some of the basics. There is a lot of code going on, so don't get worried if you see a few slides up front. We want to make sure we cover the concepts, but we are going to write a lot of code. So this is what we're covering. We're going to be doing command line and Visual Studio Code for this. Of course, this all works with Visual Studio on Windows, Visual Studio for Mac. You can write .NET in all kinds of editors and stuff. But to keep it simple, we're using command line and we're using the terminal inside of VS Code. And of course, C# and .NET. The principles we're talking about, the REST APIs, kind of apply across anything else, if you're using JavaScript and Express or whatever else to write your services to.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, it's morning for me, but we're talking pizza.
You make a breakfast pizza, John.
Breakfast pizza. So the idea is, the scenario is we're working at a pizza restaurant and we're setting up an API for them. And again, the idea with this is that a pizza restaurant may, in these days, you probably are going to also have like a mobile application, and you may also have back end services where your pizza cooks are going in and updating whether or not they're cooking the pizza or something. And so it's not just the website that you're powering; you're powering the entire operation here. So, yep. And so specifically, we'll create a new API application. And then we will test it and do all the things from the command line. And the main goal by the end of this, I think a few things. One, of course, you should understand the concepts, but two, you should just kind of feel comfortable to go and create an API application, test it, play with it, break it. Shane, I learned by just writing code and breaking it and fixing it and just playing around. Same for you?
Yeah, I would say just kind of plus one your point of just get in and play with it. I think we're going to cover a lot of the basic concepts, but there's also a lot of advanced concepts that we're not going to get into that. Again, this is just that foot in the door. But yeah, playing with stuff. I mean, I was actually building other services, strangely, right around pizza stuff too. And learning a lot, just like trying to, it's like, hey, what do I need next? Let me try this. And it really just kind of catapults you into, bigger and wider band of the technology we're using.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot to it. We did like some blog post series and things where we went really deep on web APIs, and there's quite a bit more to learn. But the first step is just being comfortable writing API applications and just getting started.
Right.
All right, let's talk REST and ASP.NET Core. So, normally when you're browsing a web page, the things you're used to your browser doing for you, your browser is an HTTP client, and it's going and getting CSS, HTML, JavaScript. And so that's kind of the way we think of, that's the way most people interact with web applications. And then they may not know it, but your phone application is also, interacting as an HTTP client and going and getting, maybe CSS and JavaScript, but getting something off of the internet for you. Behind the scenes, there's a way that the computers are talking to each other. So they have these verbs, and they're going to be, because it would be ridiculous to everyone write something from scratch, and browsers need a common way that they can interact with servers. So we have these common verbs. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, Shane, I guess the by far the most common one's going to be the get verb, right?
Yeah, it's interesting when you see the list because we've been looking at it for years and we go, oh, this completely makes sense to us, right? So we'll go through what each ones are and kind of what they do and what the responses might be. But get is what every single client out there does in order to, again, get the data from its source and represent it. And then, post, we're sending something, and delete, obviously, we're deleting something. And we'll get through some examples of all of these as we go through. But get is certainly the most common one we all start with when it comes to APIs.
Yeah. And then the second most common one is going to be that post. And every time you fill out a form, every time you log into a web page, most of the time that's going to be using a post. And so that's
Right.
a way. Get is give me something internet, and post is you're submitting something, maybe a shopping cart or whatever. And there are a lot of different ways that you can create APIs. There's different languages, there's different servers. We're talking about ASP.NET Core, and I think it's a pretty compelling place to be writing your APIs. One nice thing is that you can build and share specifically with an ASP.NET Core application. So you can use ASP.NET Core to build traditional web apps. They're, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And you can use that same system to build APIs. And it's nice. One nice reason to do that is that you can share your logic. And I've written APIs in the past where they were different between the client and the server, and different. And I'm writing. It gets complicated keeping your models the same, keeping your validation the same, all those things. And so it's nice to be able to kind of reuse your logic there.
Right. It's also an opportunity just to kind of talk a little bit about just the .NET ecosystem in itself. I mean, if you're writing, desktop applications or games or, mobile applications in Xamarin, it is the same core language, same core libraries that you can do. So you can also just jump into building APIs just as well as you've been doing your other tech stack stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very key point.
And it's fast.
Yes. Super fast. So another benefit is serialization. And serialization is the thing where I've got some data on the server. I need to send it to the client and I need to package it up in a way that they can understand. So by far the most common way people are doing that now is JSON, JavaScript object notation. But there's also XML. And I remember writing tons of XML in the past. So that's definitely still a big thing. And it's nice that ASP.NET Core APIs can just automatically out of the box package that up for you.
Yeah, and again, it's by default it does the return for JSON, which is what most web front ends or most API clients will understand easily without having to write custom parsers. And this is a fairly new option or default option. I remember back when Web API 2 came out, we used to have to write all the JSON serializers to do this work. And this is just really great. Say, get a person back or a collection of people, and then it automatically puts it in the right encoding for us.
Mm-hmm. And you can, with just a few lines of code, you can turn on XML serialization. And it's great that you can also plug in other, like say you've got a custom binary serialization or something. Mm-hmm. You can do that, but out of the box without doing anything extra, it's going to return JSON for you. Right. So, authorization and authentication are really important. There are also things you really don't want to get wrong. And, by far the biggest advice I always give people is don't write your own any of that stuff if you can help it. Especially now, things just get really complicated with tokens and refresh tokens and all the different protocols. And so it definitely makes me happy that I can, I've got that also just kind of right out of the box for me.
Yeah, and this is another one where we've done a really good job of just having this middleware where we would just say, services.add authentication, right? And it just works. So we're not going to go into that so much, but just understand that the concepts are very easy to learn and understand when it comes to doing the authentication such.
Yep. So another thing just for simplicity is to be able to keep your routing right alongside your controllers. So in the past, I kind of got started writing APIs and I was using them more with like MVC controllers, and I would have my routing other places, and then I'd have to kind of mentally put everything together and understand. So this is a nice benefit. We'll definitely be going deeper into this routing stuff later, mm-hmm. But it's great to just kind of have that simplicity there.
Yeah.
HTTPS by default. I don't know, Shane, if you've messed with having to set up certificates on your local machine. It's not fun.
Well, yeah, it's not fun. And when we hit F5 and to start debugging, if you don't have the dev cert set up on your local machine, the tooling chain that we have in .NET will automatically set that up for you. We're going to bypass that just for ease and flow through the course here, but know that it is supported by default.
Yep. Yeah, and it's also one good reason for that is we want you generally, as you're developing, to test your code and develop your code using HTTPS, because this is one of those areas where it's frustrating to try and bolt it on later. If you do all your development, you're like, now it's time for QA and now it's time to deploy to production, and it doesn't work. That's not when you want to find that out. So you really, it's a benefit to test this out early on.
Yeah.
You mentioned this earlier, Shane. It's a whole ecosystem, right? So, I mean, you'll see this a lot with any of our .NET presentations, but I think it's one of the core like superpowers of being a .NET developer is I can, during my day job, I can be writing APIs at a bank, and at night I might build a mobile game, or I might want to play with AOT or whatever. And I can, with work, I recently have been doing a lot more work on a Mac. There's no problem, it's like,
yeah.
Got tools and, so. All right. And this HTTP REPL, this is so cool. So it's a one-liner to install. It's a .NET global tool. If you're familiar with like Node global tools, the same kind of thing. I forget what those are called, but it's it's the whole thing. It's just .NET install -G, and then it's available on your computer, and it's a command line tool, and you can also use it in the terminal in VS Code.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Testing is really easy. You can just, and we'll show you hands-on with this in a bit, but it's really nice to be able to just, in a few lines of code, or, in a few commands in the terminal, just interact with your API.
Yeah, I think the point we could make about the command line one is, I know, John, in the past, both of us have probably written a couple of hundred of test apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where we're actually writing the whole front end to test the API we just wrote. And this kind of keeps us from having to do that. And then also uses some just semantics around getting a list and actually using a command line. It feels very natural when it comes to testing this.
So we got a question that came in from Matthew. Hello, Matthew, good friend. Building new APIs, why would I choose RESTful versus gRPC?
That's a good question. I've gotten this one a couple of times. So the best way I can tell you is, if you're talking machine to machine, let's say I have a number of services in the back just kind of communicating, where it's not going to be sent to a client. That's where gRPC is super fast. It's binary encoded, and it's not human readable either. It's really machine readable. If I want to send something down to a client, like a phone app or maybe a web app, RESTful is it says RESTful. I wouldn't call it RESTful. I call it like JSON over a GET endpoint.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of read yourself, and also it's just easily parsed. There are gRPC client libraries out there, but I'd say, just for practice, that's the decision I make. If I'm in a big cluster where I'm having data exchange between two services and it doesn't ever have to go to a client, then I would use gRPC. And gRPC is much better for streaming data as well.
Yeah, I think too, I think you nailed it there. I think the things that really jump out for me out of what you said is, if you're communicating machine to machine, I think also if you're communicating like externally, it's much more friendly to share an API that's RESTful. It's
Correct.
easier to document. It's easier for if you say, hey, John, I wrote this service, why don't you test it out? Here's the Swagger doc, and I can go and poke at it, and I can see what responses I'm getting. That's not quite as easy to share with other people if you're doing gRPC.
Right,
but if you're doing a bunch of microservices in a Kubernetes cluster and they need to just be really fast and you control all the code, gRPC is pretty smooth for that.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, we are up to a knowledge check. Now's where I find out if you've been paying attention, Shane. All right, let's see what we got. Okay. Which of the following is not a reason to build a web API using ASP.NET Core?
So emphasize the word "not." Don't be confused.
Yes, exactly. So why would I not want to use an API with ASP.NET Core? So the first is to build a single page application such as Angular or SPA. Interesting. Okay. To provide data to a mobile application using XML or JSON. And third, to serve a traditional HTML-based web application. So again, we got to jump backwards. We got to think negatively. I'm going to cross B off the list, I think, right away, because that's kind of one of the primary things we've talked about. We will use APIs to serve XML or JSON, say, to a mobile application.
Yeah.
What do you think about that first one?
So, yeah, there's that's an if. But yeah, I say to provide that backend server. Again, we talked about providing a place for data to be retrieved, right? And I think that this covers kind of the scenario we're talking about, where Angular or React SPA front end might want to reach out to an API to get that.
Great. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the answer we want to go with is C. Normally, you're not going to want to use an API to serve HTML-based applications. And we see in the chat, wow, we've got 308 votes. It's cool to see all the interaction. We've got 84% picking C, and I think we're going to go with C.
Oh, look at that. We got it right.
We're off to a good start. All right, Shane, I'm going to put you on the spot because it's time to create a demo application. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to start with you creating the API application and start with building and testing it. And
All
then
right.
later, we're going to switch over to me, and I'm going to write some more pizza code.
All right, pizza code. Making me hungry. It's right about lunchtime for me, too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's make sure we get the right one so nobody sees anything else I might be looking at, like how to write APIs. Okay, I've got VS Code up, and where you've got a terminal on the bottom. You can obviously do your own command line if you have, WSL or something like that, but it's just the experience itself we'll do right inside this terminal here. So what I want to do is I'm just going to use a .NET CLI, where I'm going to type .NET new, and you type Web API. I'm already in the folder that I want to be in, so I'll keep it there, and I'll just say pizza. My hands were in the wrong place, and perfect. So let me CD into my pizza folder, and we'll clear this out. And we'll see that if I open up my files here, in our pizza here, we've got our controllers. And what we want to look at really is our controllers and our weather forecast, right, John?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, we saw this here. This is our route with this controller. We'll go through routes and why they're important in a second. We've got some basic data for our weather. Super hot is not one of them, although that's what's today for me. And then we've got a logger, which is great for output and logging. And then this is that get method here, which is decorated with the HTTP get. And that's that most popular one that John and I talked about earlier. We're just generating some basic data, some randomized data here to return. Now, if I want to just run this, I do .NET run. It's going to build the application for us. Everything's great. And you'll see it's listening on our host here. And I actually had security in here, so I messed that up a little bit. We'll take that out.
While you're doing that, I think this is something where we argued back and forth as we created this, because it really is pretty easy to just create with HTTPS. But the first time you install .NET, it'll ask you prompts about installing certificates, and we just didn't want that to throw anyone off. So
so if you happen to do that by chance, like I've done on both rehearsals and this one again, I'm going to just take out my HTTPS redirect here, and we'll just take out the authorization as well in our startup class. So let's clear that out. Let's try that one more time. Let's do a .NET run here. It's going to rebuild our app, give us an endpoint, which is great. And we'll go to this 5000 here. Oh, let me bring this up to the right place. And again, don't be concerned if this happens, because you need to make sure that our routing, if I go back to our VS Code instance here, remember that we want to go to our route, which is the controller. And by convention, it says weather forecast controller. So I know that the endpoint is going to be weather forecast. So
I think that's a key thing you're pointing out here. For this one, we've only got one controller, but an API application may have 5 controllers or 100 controllers. And so that's how, and we'll talk more about this, but that's that routing thing that points us at the right controller.
Right. And you'll notice that by going to that weather forecast, we get a JSON return. Like I said, it's by default. And here's our random data. If I actually refresh this a couple of times, it should change. I saw 115 somewhere on one of these values, which is super hot. Yeah. So we have like a 6 in freezing. Some of these might not actually match up. Oh, there's 107. I'll be close to that today.
Nice.
It'll feel. So that's a really easy way for me to run and test and kind of get started here. But we also have that HTTP REPL that's available to us. And I think, John, we're going to go through that a little bit in a second, right?
Yeah, we are. In fact, I think you could go through that now.
Okay. So I've got the app running right now. And what I'm going to do is just add a new terminal window here. And let's get the noise out of here real quick. And if we just do HTTP REPL, and
And
I'm
then
going to
remember,
pass.
yep.
Yep, I'm going to pass in my endpoint.
I always get this wrong. So you can, if you forget to type in your endpoint, it's fine. You can add it. But it's easiest if you type it in right now.
Right. So now we've connected to our application, and it actually looks at the Swagger endpoint. This is Open API description, and this is really how it finds out what's available to us. So what I'm going to do is hit LS to get a list of what's there, and now we have weather forecasts. I can CD into weather forecast. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to say get, right?
No, I think you do need to CD into it.
Oh, look at me. I always forget that. There we go. Now we have our endpoint with that. Now I'm just going to type get. And you'll see that in the terminal window here, I have the same results that I had in the browser. So I could just run that weather forecast. If we have more API endpoints, if we CD'd up here and then did a list again, we would see those other endpoints in here too. I think, John, we're going to add some pizza controllers and things to this example, and you'll start to see where we're going there.
Yep.
Now, there was a question, John, I'll ask you this. A question from David says, why HTTP REPL instead of curl?
Yeah, it's funny. And then Partha also asked, why not use Postman? And we're not selling anything, right? So like HTTP REPL is free. You can use all of these for free. And use whatever makes you happy is something Scott Hanselman says, and I always agree with that. There are some benefits to why we're using HTTP REPL here. Compared to curl is kind of a general purpose HTTP thing. You can use it to say, go to a URL, get me some stuff, but it doesn't have it's not built for REST development quite as much. So and then Postman is nice as a client. And there are some others out there. I was using Insomnia the other day. There's some other nice kind of REST clients. Yeah. Those are more client applications, and it's another thing, like you're switching between them. The thing I like about this is I can use it directly in the terminal, and it's not like a big thing to pop over into. It's also got this cool, like, little known feature where, like, put and patch requests, it actually like interacts with your editor and makes it easy to post things to them.
Yeah, and I think you're actually going to show a bit of that before, right?
I will. Yeah, and there's even things like there's this Swagger UI that comes up in the browser, and so I mean there's a lot of different options you have, but so another tool to add to your tool belt. But I think it's a pretty compelling one.
It is, and Angelos on our team wrote a blog post about that. So if you just search for HTTP REPL, it talked through like what are the options, how does it compare to things like Postman and HTTP IE, and there's a bunch of tools out there. And it is really just about us kind of giving you choice and seeing kind of what makes you happy, right? So try them all, and whatever makes you happy, use it. Just write the APIs in Basement at Core.
Cool. All right. Well, I think you nailed your demo there, Shane.
Whew.
All right. So I will go back and share my screen, and we'll talk through what we did. All right. Let's see if I can share a screen. All right. I seem to have done it.
All right.
That's exciting. Okay. So we went through, we created an API, and we built and tested it using the HTTP REPL. So all good stuff. So now let's talk about API controllers. And so, in the previous one, we created a web application and interacted with HTTP REPL. Hopefully that's not news to anybody.
Yeah.
You pointed out this controller. And so this is an example of a weather controller. We argue back and forth about things when we're creating these templates. In some cases, we like to give you examples. So we don't like to just say, here's a new thing, figure it out yourself. We like to say, here's an example controller. This shows you how to write your own controller.
Right.
So this is an example, and this is an entire control. This is basically all the code you need to create a REST endpoint.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we kind of think it's a little bit more compelling than I think before the template had something like value 1, value 2, which really didn't. It was a great blank template to start with. But again, we're trying to show you a little bit more with how to generate some data. I think in the future we might change it to all of our pizza stuff that we've been working on.
Yep. Yep. All right. So let's dig into this code that we wrote here. And uh, so, one of the nice things is this class here, we'll see it uses this controller base. So this weather forecast controller inherits from controller base. And so what's nice with that is that it kind of brings in all this kind of magic, and we'll dig into some of what that does for you, but you don't have to write a lot of code yourself. A nerd note, because a lot of our API developers are also MVC developers, and you may be used to using controller as your base class.
Right.
But the controller also has a lot of like web stuff, things for like binding to HTML forms and, serving razor views and that sort of stuff. You don't need all of that. So controller base is this kind of lightweight base class.
Yeah, it's specifically for handling the API stuff, and you're about to hit right on what I was going to say.
Cool. All right, we've also got this API controller attribute and this route attribute. So that API control, we've got the controller base, which has kind of like methods and things on it. The API controller is kind of magic too, though, Shane, right?
Yeah. So the API controller gives you a lot of base things around kind of what are the return types, and it'll tell you that if you've ever gone to a website and you got like a 404, like it's broken, right, or not authorized, or you get some code or a 500 or something like that. We have all these types of returns built into this API controller, so you don't have to add a lot of libraries to make all that happen. But that just basically says that it is designed for API interaction via the verbs, those get, put, post, and deletes verbs itself.
Cool. All right. And then we've got this route attribute as well. And that's what, in your example, you did this weather controller, and it brought us over to the weather controller class.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's two kind of cool things with this. One is that you could put any code, you could put anything you wanted there. You could say Shane's Pizza, weather, whatever thing, and it would go to that. But here we've got this special thing, this brackets controller. And that's kind of a substitution there, right?
Yeah, it's a convention. So it just basically, if you name your class, like this one's weather forecast controller, it takes basically, think of it as it's taken off the word controller off your class name for your endpoint. So if this said pizza controller, we used to be able to go to /pizza. There's other things we can put in that route as well. So let's say you want to put all of your APIs underneath a path of /API. We could go in and type /API and then put in those square braces controller, and then the endpoint would then exist on /API/weather forecast.
What's the benefit of using this like controller substitution instead of just typing the word weather controller there?
Well, one, if you rename it, right, I think that that helps too. But that route attribute really just allows you to do control and consistency across your design. So if like I said, everything wants to be under /API, or I want to go with the convention of forecast controller. If I did a file new add API controller and just named it, John, it would generate John controller and then know that path would be on /John. So it's just like, it just does it for me and establishes the routes without really having to do a whole lot of thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. So being able to rename and refactor is definitely nice. And then also just kind of having less code to think about and maintain.
Right.
If by default, I and everyone on my team uses this controller, it's just kind of a standard. Mm-hmm. You know what your route is going to match up to.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then we've got this HTTP GET attribute. So I would assume that's going to map that HTTP GET verb over to this method.
Yeah. And that's it's again, trying to keep you from having to get caught up in some of the basics of, these verbs and implementing them. The saying, I could have named that. This method's named GET. It could be named whatever. I need some weather or whatever. And it just knows that when that GET request comes into the API, this is the method that's going to then execute and return those results.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So that gives me the flexibility to name or rename my methods whatever I want. And then I can very quickly see GET is what's going to go into this.
Right.
Cool. All right. We are up to another knowledge check.
Another test.
We're getting so much knowledge going on. All right. So get ready. Okay. So what is the purpose of that API controller attribute?
Mm.
So that's an interesting one. And for this one, we didn't do what is not a purpose. So this one we can actually think
What is
straight.
the purpose?
What is the purpose? Okay. So it enables opinionated behaviors that make it easier to build web APIs.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty reasonable. Okay. API controller is the base class which provides standard functionality for handling HTTP requests.
Mm.
All right, third one, API controller provides routes HTTP requests to the associated controller class.
Well, I don't. I have some thoughts on this one. So I think that it's not necessarily the base class, right? So if I'm looking at B, the base class, we talked about the differences between MVC and APIs, and we want to use controller base as our base class, is what I recall.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's right. Yeah, controller base is that base class, and then API controller is it's an attribute, not a base class. So we're going to cross B off the list.
Sure. What do you think about C there?
I think C is a trick. I'm going to cross C off the list. We did talk about something that routes HTTP requests to associated controller classes, but that's actually routing. So that's the route attribute and not the API controller attribute.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I'm looking at our results over here, and we've got a mixed bag. We've got a little over 325 votes right now.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's leaning towards C. We've got 41% at C.
All right. I think I agree with you. I think as we talk through this, A is actually, I think, the right answer here.
Yeah.
But we are bucking the trend. I do see, as I'm saying that, as we're discussing, there's more votes coming in for A.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and vote for A while it's still the underdog.
Yeah. We've got a question here too related to this a little bit here, John. Does the class name have to have the controller suffix?
I do not think it does. So you can use others, and there's different logic that you can use. You actually don't even have to inherit from controller base,
right?
But there's more magic that happens for you if depending what you do. So you could name your controller class whatever, but then you just need to pay attention to that route attribute.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been a bit since I looked at it, but that logic will strip out controller if it's there. But if it's not going to like explode on you.
Yeah, it's a naming convention for sure. So yeah, if you're going to use the controller token in the route, then controller should be in the class name.
All right, it is time for us to do some demos. This is time where John writes some code.
We'll see really how fast.
This goes. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to do two different steps here. First, we're going to add a data store, and for this data store, this is not really the focus of what we're doing. We're not doing a whole bunch of API stuff in this section. We're just setting it up so we can actually write a pizza API. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, and then we'll focus on the API specific stuff in the next section. So let's switch over. I will bring up my code. All right. So I've got basically the same thing that you just wrote. I've got oops, let's get that full screen. Okay. So I have this the same application. It's running. It's got just the API controller. So it's got this weather forecast controller. And I'm going to want to go through and add a data store to this application. So first of all, I want to track my models. So I'm going to go into here and I'll say Control-C. So I'm going to stop my application. And then I'm going to go and I will add a services or a models folder. Go models. And actually add a file and a directory at the same time. I could type /models/pizza or whatever, but I'm going to do this in 2 steps just to avoid any extra special typos. So now I'm going to create a pizza class. So in this models folder, I'll go through here and I'll say pizza.cs. For this pizza class, I'm just going to paste in the code for this. So this is just a very simple pizza. Convention, and especially with an API, you're normally going to want some sort of ID, integer ID, and it definitely is going to make it easier for saving to a database or something.
Yeah.
We've got a name, and then we've got the is gluten free, which is required. In this day and age, you've got all the gluten concerns, and so we'll set that up.
But it's also a free pizza, so no worries.
Yeah, free pizza.
No price.
Okay, so now let's create a service. There's all kinds of different ways you can organize your code. I like to create like a services directory rather than putting it all in the root of my application.
And John, I'll just note that you put your services directory underneath your models directory.
Oh, that's just fancy.
Drag that down.
Oh, yeah, I can just drag it up.
Yeah.
All right. I also put. Oh, man, this is a mess, isn't it? You know what I'm going to do?
What have you done, John?
What am I doing? Okay, let's go back here. Actually, how do I close this? I've got this outline.
Little chevron on the left.
Yeah.
There you go. Close that. There you go.
Close see, that's what I had all that stuff open.
There you go. Now you can see what you're doing.
I'm already feeling so much like I can breathe again. It's all okay. So let's go back up here to the root. Let's create this models. Let's create the pizza. All right. Let's paste in that code. Now we're ready to create our pizza class. I'll go back again to the root, create services. And now I'm ready to go in and create our data store. And this data store, you can pretend this is just where we're going to be throwing our, this is where you would be saving your stuff to a database, right? But so I'm just going to create a pizza service. All right. So I'll talk through this real quick so it's not completely smoke and mirrors, but this is really our pretend database. So this is our entire database here. It's a static list of pizzas. And then we initialize it by creating 2 pizzas right off the bat. So we've got the non-gluten-free classic Italian, and then we have the veggie that is gluten-free. And then we have a few methods in here. Now, I'm going to throw a quiz at you, Shane. Is this an API controller?
No.
Okay, it's not a controller. What are the things that make it clear it's not an API controller?
Well, it's not decorated with the API controller attribute. I would go with that first. See, I pay attention.
Yep. I was trying to I thought you might be dozing off on me.
No, not dozing off. I'm going along with the instruction. I'm doing the same thing you are, John.
Oh, nice. Okay, so first of all, yeah, no API controller attribute. It doesn't have that controller base. Now, this is a place where, and part of why I asked this is because we have a get all and a get method, but those don't have those HTTP get attributes.
Right.
So
this is to interact with our actual data store. Like you said, it could be a database where we write a little, ADO connections or Cosmos DB connections and get it from that database. But we have basically a static list of data.
Cool. All right. So now we're just going to build this and make sure it works. It's not hooked up to anything, so there's nothing really new to test, but we just want to build it. So .NET build. Hey, we're at build and we're building. Very exciting.
That's just nuts.
It worked. This is the kind of stuff I like to see. All right, we're done with that. So now we're ready to go on to the next section and actually add a pizza controller. So this is where it gets real. Okay, so I'm going to go into the controllers. And, as you pointed out, it's not the end of the world if you drag and drop and move things around. But we do have this for a reason. We have this kind of folder structure so you can keep your code organized.
Yeah.
And one of the big things I've learned about working with any code base, especially code that someone else wrote or I wrote a long time ago, is keep it organized.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right. So
you can put your pizza controller anywhere, right? Because it's all about the route and that's the bigger thing, right? But keeping it organized makes it easier.
Yeah. All right. So I've created pizza controller. And to save you from watching me type, I've pasted it in, but really there's not a lot of code here at this point.
Right.
So yeah, we'll talk through it. We've got these usings. And by the way, if you've been watching the build .NET, what's new in .NET stuff, it's pretty cool that we're getting global usings. So that'll shorten up my code in the future.
Yeah.
Then we've got our namespace. We do have an API controller attribute, and we've got a route, and it's got exactly like you had before, this controller attribute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the exact same route attribute. So here's this weather controller. And here, because this is the weather forecast controller, it maps to weather forecast. Now my pizza controller, this is going to map to pizza.
Yeah.
And then it inherits from controller base, and that's it. Now, at this point, if I ran this, it wouldn't do anything because I don't have any methods that that map to a verb.
Right. And nothing to get.
There's nothing to get. Fortunately, I've got a service over here. I've got this pizza service, and it's able to get a list of pizzas or a specific pizza. So now we're at the point where we want to get all the pizzas. And I think in general, that's a good life goal. You want to get all the pizzas.
All the pizzas.
Okay. So here is, all right, let's see if I remember. You told me this the other day because I always forget. I think Shift-Alt-F. That is supposed to format it, but I'm not quite.
Yeah, if you're using a lambda, so maybe that doesn't do that right. So.
Yeah. So here's what we've got for this. This is a get all. So now I've got a HTTP get attribute. And then this is very, very simple. If this is easier to read, you can throw this up like this. This is just saying when I call the get all the pizzas, and it calls over to that pizza service.
Right.
All right. So now we're going to follow the exact same similar kind of system, and this time we're going to get a single pizza. So,
and that's why we need that ID field, right? So we can say get number 2 or something.
Exactly. So here, let me clean this all up again. So Shift-Alt-F, let's see. It's happier here because we didn't have, and then
you're missing the square brace there.
There we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So wait, before you start, John, I got a question.
Yeah.
You've got like a parameter in that HTTP get, like the ID. Is that coming from a URL?
Yeah, it is. So, but there's also, you can bind to other things. So you can map to posted things. For a get, you're not going to have really anything else. So it is going to come from the URL or the route. That can be a few different ways, though. It could be passed in via the query string. So that's the question mark, and then you put things in the URL at the end of the URL. But it could also be part of the path. So /ID. So yeah, that's a great question. So this is what's going to map to this. So you'll see this is automatically going to pass whatever ID is in the parameter or in the query that's passed in. It's going to come over to my attribute, and I'll be able to get one pizza in this case. So this is where I have a little self-control. I don't get all the pizzas. I just get this one. All right, so let's do .NET Run. Now, I'm tempted here. There's also .NET Watch Run.
Oh.
For .NET Watch, you can just type, and it'll automatically restart as I type my code. I'm going to stay on the script, but I'm just pointing this out. This is a nice productivity thing that you can do because it'll automatically, as I change my code, it'll restart the application for me.
Yeah.
So, all right, and let's see what we're getting. So
let's see if
run.
You've done your job and done some good copy and paste code here.
Exactly. Yeah. How could I have gotten it wrong by this point? We'll see. Okay, so it is running, and now I can switch over. I've got my HTTP REPL already set up. Okay, so now I can go through and I can say ls. So this is really cool. I've still got the weather forecast, and I could go in and I could get my weather forecast. Let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got tab completion, by the way. So I did cd tab.
Yeah.
And then I can say get. So here's my weather. I didn't break the weather, which is good. All right, so now list them again. And now I'll go in and say pizza. So cd pizza. And I can say get.
Nice.
So this returns that JSON. Yep. And so this sends back. Now this is cool because in my pizza service, I created a couple of pizzas. This is just C# code. I never wrote any JSON formatting. I never did anything fancy with JSON. But just by nature of it being an HTTP, an ASP.NET Core API, it did that for me. So
right.
I call get. That's this one here. Get all the pizzas. So now let's get one of those pizzas. What are you in the mood for? Are you looking for classic Italian or veggie?
I'd go with the Italian, I think.
All right. So let's get. Whoa. Let's not do that. Get one. So there we go. So there, it just got one pizza back. So, and we'll look at this in a bit, but here this is an HTTP response code.
Right.
And then it's telling me this is JSON data. So this, as a person, I don't care about this, but as a computer, as the way computers kind of talk back and forth between each other, they need to know this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to make it easier for the computer to do that. Kestrel's the ASP.NET Core server, and then it's doing some chunk transfer encoding, which I assume is a good thing. And so
downloads a little bit at a time.
What's exactly? Yep. All right. So I'm going to go completely off script. I want to get pizza number 12. Get 12. All right. So it is not allowing me to get pizza number 12. It's throwing the book at me. It's very unhappy.
Sure
So it says it's not found. It gives me a status code of 404, which I happen to know is an HTTP not found. And this is a cool thing that we're not going to dig into now, but this is a neat thing that's just part of how API controllers with ASP.NET Core work. Is it actually includes a trace ID.
Right, which we can use to build maps on how a session went through a particular application or how calls went through. There is a trace ID, it's a reference ID to the actual request, which is really neat when it comes to doing things like App Insights and other telemetry.
Exactly. So like App Insights, for instance, that's an example where you may have a web application that's also got an API, that's also got a database and a cache, and it's very confusing, like what went wrong? Why was the pizza not found?
Right.
And so this makes it easy to trace that request.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I think that we have covered the basics here. We've talked through getting a pizza, getting a list of pizzas. We've tried to get a non-existent pizza, and that didn't work, unfortunately. Otherwise, we'd have free pizzas for life. All right. So now I think we can go back and we can talk about what we learned.
No, I think we're going to go through some, like, how do we make a pizza?
Okay. So let me see. Create a pizza model, add, build the web API.
Yeah, we did all that.
We did all that. So now I add the controller, and at this point, we only are doing the get a single pizza.
Right.
Now we're going to talk through some CRUD stuff, and then we'll actually build that out. So.
Okay. I'm going to try and work through these CRUD operations. I think they're pretty
we can go pretty quick through this.
Yeah. So these are the verbs. We want to map, again, we'll talk about CRUD. It's that create, read, update, delete for our operations of our pizza. And then John talked about get, which is the read operation that maps one-to-one. And you'll see that in the slide here, we show the attributes that you would put on your methods to support those types of requests for put and post. I think that it makes pretty much sense when you look between the acronym values and what the operation is.
Yeah.
So the post here this is where we want to create the actual pizza. And when we say we want to send the data to our API to have something created, there's some various status codes that we can get returned as a part of that. And you'll see that that's what's built into that API controller attribute on our class that has this stuff built in. So again, you get a 201. You saw when John tried to get pizza 12, it was a 404. You'll get that on the get. On the post, if you try to create an object that just has a bad values in it, you can get an error code 400, which is the bad request. So
these are useful for like having these standard error codes makes it easy to process things and understand. As I'm writing client codes or browsers, they understand all this stuff. That created at action 201 is going to return It's going to say, yes, I created a pizza. And it also returns the information about it, like the ID, so I can get that back.
Yeah, exactly.
So post creates a brand new pizza, and then put is a way of kind of updating an existing one.
Yeah, and I get these two confused, right? So put and post. I'm like, what's the one I need to do to actually create something? So I've always remembered with put, it has the U in it, which means update. So kind of remember that as if you ever get confused around there. So if we're modifying or changing values here, again, we're just going to call that put. The client will call put, send the data to be updated. And then you can see from these results, these are the common results that you should send back if you have issues with it. So if it's updated, no content is the actual result, which seems a little confusing, but it'll send back a 204, which means it was updated in our particular data store, being the memory cache. Mm-hmm. The not found is an interesting one, because in the case of John's 12, if he said I wanted to update item 12, we would validate this 12 even exists for us to update. And if it doesn't, we can send back that 404. And then if we send a number 12, and then in the actual pizza object, it has a different ID, like maybe 10, then we'd say, hey, these don't match. Something is wrong in your request. And that's why we would send back a 400.
Okay, cool. And these ones are ones where you kind of need to use your judgment sometimes as you map them over. You need to think, what do the verbs say? What did the status code say? And, the intent here, if you're intending to update a pizza and we don't have that pizza, then not found makes sense. If you're trying to update a pizza with is gluten-free, maybe, well, that's not a value we can accept. And so that's a bad request.
Sure.
Cool.
All right. What's next? Delete, maybe?
Delete. So delete's pretty simple. Get rid of one of the pizzas. So
yeah, and again, the not found one is the most important one. It's like, hey, delete 12. 12 doesn't exist, so we're going to send back that 404. If we are successful, then that's again that no content result. I think that delete's probably one of the easier ones, along with get, to understand.
Agree. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So now let's go right into implementing those operations. So let's go in, and these are the things we're going to do: add, modify, remove, and then we're going to run it. So this is
cool. We're going to add all of the capabilities of our controller here.
There we go. Okay. So first of all, we want to be able to add a pizza. So let's switch over into here. And fortunately, I've got a pizza service. My pizza service has in it a way to add a pizza. So I've got this add method in here. So I'm going to go into my controller, and I'll go to post. So post is for creating a new one, and putting is for updating. I will always remember that till the day I die. The U in put stands for update. So thank you for that, Shane.
You're welcome.
So there we go. And then we'll Shift Alt F our way to some sane looking code. So what this is doing, there's no parameter to map. We're posting because we're creating a new one. So there's no ID for it yet. So it's going to accept a pizza. It's going to add it using the pizza service. And this is some of the magic of that controller base, where it will return this created at action. So that's going to automatically do that 201 code, and it's going to return the information about the pizza.
Right.
So that's pretty straightforward. So now the next one is wanting to modify pizza. And this one is going to take a little more code, because in this case, we actually have to look up the pizza before we edit it. So this one we'll do Shift Alt F again. And what I'm doing here, by the way, is as you're watching, if you want to follow along on these, this code is actually written up in this tutorial, and you can just copy and paste it in. There are different ways that different people understand code. If you like to hand type code, you can do that. I actually did hand type all this code because I wrote this module, but this is something where, in this case, I'm pasting it in and kind of reading through it so we can take some time to understand what's there.
Right.
So here's this thing. In this case, we're updating an existing pizza. So we've got an ID to map to. So we take that ID and we take the pizza. So the pizza here is the data we want to update. So we got a few things here. Okay, first of all, if the pizza, if they don't match up, so if I said update pizza number 5 and then I passed in a different ID, I made a mistake.
Right.
I've got something wrong.
Yeah.
If I pass an ID that doesn't exist, that's not found. That makes sense. Otherwise, we update it and we return no content. Now, this one, you could also return the pizza and you could return it if that was helpful. But in this case, we already know what we wanted to update it as.
Right.
So it doesn't really make sense to use up that bandwidth. All right, we're up to our last one.
And the delete action operates pretty much the same, where we're passing in the ID, we're looking to see if it exists, and then if it's there, great. Then we'll go ahead and delete that service, and again return that no content as well.
Okay, cool. All right, so I think what we're gonna do next is we'll run it. So that's exciting.
See what happens.
All right, so I seem to have done something weird.
You're in your other window. Go to your other terminal there.
Yeah, but I've got something weird selected. Okay.
So you can also just close the terminal altogether.
Okay. I've got something weird going on my keyboard. It's like locked. Caps lock. Oh no, this is crazy. Just a sec. Let me try and. Okay. Okay. There. I guess it's running. Let's see if this
still running, but you have to I think you have to rebuild it.
I can't. So I hit Control C and my keyboard seems to be locked, and I may need to get another keyboard. This is a little crazy. I don't know. Here, let's see if I can do run. Oh, I can't do that there. A little wacky. We may have less fun with this if I can't get this going. Here, let's see if this. I don't know. Okay. Okay. It's like this is crazy. My keyboard seems to be completely whacked out. Okay, let's try this. And let's try opening up VS Code again. All right. So let's see about this.
Trying to help out, John.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. That's a little wacky.
I'm trying. I would have to rebuild everything.
Okay. So no, I think I've got it running now.
All right. Cool.
Thanks to Rob in the chat for the. Okay. So now I'm going to separately. That was crazy. Okay. So HTTP REPL. And we're doing localhost.
In 5,000. Perfect.
All right.
Wow,
that was a little bit of fun. Okay. So switching over here, we have the pizza running. We have okay. So now let's do ls. Okay. So we have our pizza. It just has get and post. Let's see if I have all my stuff. I may need to build it again.
Can you go into pizza and then do the ls on it?
Okay. There it is. Okay. All right. So now we can test out some stuff. So what do we have available in this pizza? So first of all, this is something I definitely want to show off. I could create a pizza using something like this. I could go in and I could say post. And this is a way to update. And this is okay, but I've got to do it in the command line. I might get some typos wrong. So we'll try that. We'll create a pizza. And that was a post. So it's creating a new pizza. And then we've got its ID of 3 and it's Hawaii. So that's okay, but I really would prefer, instead of it being Hawaii pizza, I'd rather call it Hawaiian.
Hawaiian. Yeah, that's a Hawaiian type pizza. Now, where do we get the pizza?
Yeah, exactly. So I could type a put. I could type put here. But in this case, I want to show off one of my favorite features here. So I'm going to type post or put 3. Not pup, put 3. Okay. So what this does is HTTP REPL, you can tell it what your editor of choice is. And in this case, I have told it VS Code. So now I can say, all right, I want it to be ID of 3. I want it to be Hawaiian, right? And now I have to do two things. I have to save it and I have to close it. And when I do that, it's created that. So here it returned this no content. So now let's do get 3.
Look at that.
That's
I
pretty
love
simple.
the integration between between the tooling, and you can have that pop out to Notepad or Visual Studio or
Sublime, whatever,
Sublime. Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Anything you wanted. So that definitely is handy to be able to do this. If I did like post and then do this, then boom, I can create something. And then I'm going to, in this case, I'm just going to close it. And it's going to say, whoa, well, in that case, I need to work on my validation, right? Because there it
there's no
created one
name.
with no name. Okay, so let's delete that one. Delete 4. And hopefully it's going to say yes. Okay, no content. And now let's list them again. So get. So I have 3 pizzas.
That's pretty hot.
Yeah, so this is really nice to be able to kind of interact and dig through them all directly there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
gosh, are we? Hopefully, we'll have some questions here.
I
I don't
think
know.
yeah, we've done all that. We've done our implementation. We've done our updates, our deletes, and all of that. I
I,
think we're about to wrap up for some questions, maybe.
yeah, let me show one other neat thing, which is here. There's also the Swagger UI,
Oh
and so
yes,
so this is just built into ASP.NET Core. And by browsing to localhost 5000/Swagger, I also get this web-based UI. So if you
yeah,
prefer to work through it with this, you can do this. And this is an interactive way where you can go through and you can play with things. And you can also, it understands the parameters, what is in a pizza. And so I can go through and I can create things and delete them here. So for instance, I could go in and try it out and delete the pizza right directly from there as well.
yeah. And
So that,
it's good to point out too, John. I'm glad you showed this that the HTTP REPL uses the same definition, the Open API definition, to interact with the API, as does the Swagger UI test harness that we have here. So this shows, and if you want to use Postman, Postman can actually point to that same Swagger JSON file,
yeah.
um, and also do the same implementation if that's a tool that you like to use too.
Yeah, so that's a great thing with this is that you have the flexibility because you're writing to web standards, because you're using that Swagger definition. You can really jump back and forth and use a variety of tools as you're working.
Yeah, exactly.
All
All
right,
right.
so we've created a working API controller. Not a whole lot of code. We've got these get puts posts. They're going to be pretty standard. Hopefully, if you're using some sort of service or database persistent stuff. But generally this is kind of the format you'll be using. So I believe we will skip over. Let's just talk about what we learned.
All right.
All right. So we learned how to create a web API. That was pretty good. We used an in-memory database. This is definitely a place where we'd say don't use an in-memory database because as soon as I close my application, all of those pizzas are gone. So you're
Yeah.
actually going to be using any framework or something like that in the future. We learned about your basic CRUD operations, and we learned how to test using the command line, which I think is some of the, even if you're a seasoned API developer, there's some neat tips and tricks in there for you.
Cool.
All
All right.
right. So this is available. You can go through this as well as there's an entire learning path. So you can go to AKMS CON062 and you can go through all of that. And I don't know, Shane, there's just a ton of great content coming out.
Yeah, we've got a weekly Learn TV series. I think John, if it's on the next slide, we highlight that. Where we've got I think the next one is June the 7th, where we're going to be talking about a little bit about identity, so that authorization and logging in to your apps and things like that. So I think check out AKMS/Learn Live. We're constantly doing sessions on there. I know I've got one coming up in a few months around APIs and supporting the Power Platform as well. So definitely check out there.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And this is a really cool thing that, you know, there's a lot of great content that we're developing. We're putting a lot of effort into updated, you know, learn modules, and then being able to watch people walk through them live and see them, you know, and follow along with them is pretty cool.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, I think we have a few minutes left. If you have something you want to throw into the chat there, and we'd be happy to answer those, or our moderators will certainly pick them up.
Yep.
All right. They're coming.
Yeah. All right.
We're waiting for the influx
Let's see those
of questions. Yeah. There's our influx of questions.
You know, we've got this amazing team of moderators. I'm sure they're swatting all the questions away.
That's right. That's right. I'll tell you, I've a couple of things that remind me as we were walking through this session here is things like organizing it into services. I use that a lot now, and it's just a good reminder for organizing my code and letting that thing do the work. And there's a lot of stuff that we didn't cover around dependency injection and being able to inject that services class instead of using it as a static. And that those learning paths that we have around just .NET and C# API development go through a number of those things here.
Yeah.
We've got a good question here. It's like, why would iAction result be used instead of action result?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, you know, in general, for a lot of these kind of standard things, I think a lot of the time you're going to want to use interfaces as to allow for testing. So that's a big benefit of interfaces. It allows you to swap out and use maybe a stub or you know, something else through dependency injection and make it testable.
Right.
Also for integration testing, that can be handy. Jeff has a great question about patch.
Yeah.
Patch is an interesting one. And, you know, there's actually, as I was preparing for this, there's pretty good discussion of this on Wikipedia, where like pretty terse thing. The difference between patch and put. So a put is, here is all this JSON data and replace the ID with this data. A patch is more of, here are instructions for making an update. So
it's also, I'm sorry, John. It's also the other thing too is it's partial updates, right? So I might want to pass an ID and only change one value within there. So what's good with that is if you have really large data sets that you're passing across and say, I want to update these two fields on a particular object, patch is another one to do it. Not all APIs support that.
Yeah, very, very key. Yeah, patch is kind of a specific thing. It's more optimized, but it's not, like you said, not as widely supported.
Yeah. Sean's got a good question, right? About generating documentation.
Yeah. So, and we're using Swagger. Swagger or OpenAPI is kind of the standard for generating that documentation. We're using Swashbuckle, and that's actually built into the templates. There's some other good ones out there. There's a whole ecosystem around Swagger and OpenAPI. So, but Swashbuckle is kind of built into the things.
If you look at the docs around Swashbuckle and ASP.NET Core, there's a lot of attributes that you can put on top of all of your methods that describes what's the return types, what the accept types. And I look at that Swagger and OpenAPI definition as a very good head start to documenting code.
Yep. Yeah. You know, Wesley has a good question here on what's a good way, like, if you're creating a new API project, do you start first by designing the routes and the JSON response? Do you work at your API level and work back to your controllers? This one, there's different ways, and it depends on your requirements. I like to start by creating models and creating if I can control it, I would prefer to return the JSON that is serialized by ASP.NET Core rather than mapping them. You can override it, but it's easier if you don't have to.
Yeah. And you can design all the routes, right? You can say what these routes are, what's the data you're going to accept, and then do the implementation later. And that's where you might want to come in with interfaces as well to your actual API controllers and kind of extending that capability. So that's another way to do it as well.
Yeah. I think in general, it starts with a conversation. It starts with, what do you need? Do you have rigid requirements for the API, or can I provide you this data and you look at it?
Well, John, I think that takes us to the end.
That's all the time. That was a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Thank you to everyone that joined us. I had a lot of fun and learned how to unfreeze VS Code, which was neat. And we wrote some APIs in ASP.NET Core, which was the goal.
Never without a challenge, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Woo. All
All right. Well,
right.
John,
Thanks, everyone.
appreciate you taking the time.